This session was recorded during the 2016 symposium of the American Association of Woodturners. It shows some techniques for presenting and receiving remote demonstrations. Although this session is targeted towards woodturners, it can be adapted by just about anyone who teaches or demonstrates. I start with some slides that introduce the topic, and then I show a variety of equipment that can be used for these demonstrations. A link to a resource sheet for this session should be available in the video's description area. A few notes before we begin. I recorded most of this session live using the camera mixing software and the cameras attached to a computer sitting atop the lathe in the demo room. 2 iPhones were connected wirelessly as video inputs, one on a remote-controlled pan-tilt head, so I could use their cameras when interacting with the audience. I've also added a few insets that show some of the equipment mounting that was obvious in the room but not shown in the recording. Some additional footage was provided by the AAW from a camera that Rick Baker had on a boom arm. Oh, and the reason I look quite sunburned in some of the shots and have a green halo around me is that the webcam in the lid of the notebook computer was set to automatic white balance, and it tried to compensate for the green screen behind me. I should have set the white balance and exposure manually. Now on to the presentation. Welcome, welcome. We have about an hour to do about 3 or 4 hours worth of stuff. Now, as I was preparing this demo, it kept getting more and more and more involved. So we'll drill down as much as we can, but we might as well start. My name is Alan Zenreich. People just know me as Alan Z. And Lauren and I live in a town called Oradell, New Jersey. We are hobbyist woodturners. I am a techno geek, which is going to be no surprise to people that know me. I tell people that if I was a professional woodturner, I wouldn't be able to afford to have woodturning as a hobby. I am in it for the toys. I like learning new techniques, whether they be on the lathe or in the shop, or video or audio or any of these things. So I'm at home with the techno geekdom. Now, let me just go to the next slide. All right, so we're going to be covering a bunch of things. I've got a slide deck. We'll be able to share this deck later on, but I don't know where it's going to be uploaded to yet. It'll probably be uploaded to the AAW website. And I'm going to do a little demonstration of a bunch of different features here. And I'm also going to kind of follow up with a bunch of slides. We may not get through the whole deck, but I'm not too concerned about that. So how did I get into this? I'm a member of the Woodturning Fundamentals Committee for the AAW, and I've done a few videos that are on YouTube and Vimeo. And I got a call from Mike Hunter from Hunter Tools that said, you know, we had a remote demonstration at our club. We had 2 of them. One worked out really well and one didn't work out well at all. We'd like to see if there's a better way to do this. And he said, well, you're a geek, you know this kind of stuff, so let's see what we can do. And so I've spent about the last 10 or 11 months trying to come up with a system that is workable for pretty much anybody. Now, the thing to note is that what you're seeing here, you don't need all this stuff. You're not trying to do a demonstration showing a whole bunch of different things. You're just trying to get your presentation done. And so I've got 3 systems here. I've got the computer that I actually use in my shop. That's this one here. And it's got a couple of cameras attached to it. I've got a computer over there, which is just a laptop computer that I bought a couple of years ago for $250. And then I've got a little tablet computer. And the reason I bought this tablet computer is if we were doing a remote demonstration and the club said, well, we've got a screen, but nobody knows how to use a computer, I could send them that little tablet computer. It cost me about $150. I can send it to them in a little box and say, plug this into your monitor. So I'm really trying to make it very easy. I don't want people to have to go out and buy a $30,000 TriCaster or things like that. So that's how I got involved with this. Now, the thing is, well, what about this whole remote demonstration things? In order to do remote demonstrations, the demonstrators need to learn some new skills, most notably how to use a computer and how to handle cameras. Paradigm shifts here. The big paradigm shift is that the demonstrator handles his or her own cameras. We're not dependent on a camera person. Now, every once in a while, you get someone that knows what to do with a camera, like Rick here. But in general, they don't. And if you're in your shop demonstrating, well, you don't have a camera person. So the paradigm shift is that the demonstrator needs to learn a few new skills in order to work effectively. This session is for two different kinds of people. One is demonstrators and people that want to be demonstrators. What do you need to learn to be on the transmitting end of things? And then also club program officers, people that are responsible for booking outside people. Like we have one club that has a lot of outside demonstrators come in, and we've got another club that we belong to that hasn't had an outside demonstrator since I've known them. The word inbreeding is I mean, it's okay because they're good turners, but they're getting nobody except their own club. And it's not practical for them to bring in people because there's a small club, there's no money, you know, clubs are poor by design. So this is a way of doing things a little differently. And so a demonstration can be done remotely either at a club or towards a club or symposium venue, or that same gear that we're using to do this kind of stuff can also be used to record. So if you do YouTube videos or want to do YouTube videos, you could use the same setup around your lathe and simply record. Or you could do one-on-one or small group demonstrations. If you've got a student that you want to be able to look over their shoulder, or you want them to look over your shoulder, you could do the same kind of thing. Now, we did a demonstration for the First State group in Delaware, and Tom is sitting here in the front row. And let's see, let me try something. If I come over here, and I come over here, and so I come over here, let's see if we can show Tom. There's Tom. And Tom, you want to just tell a little bit, what was your club's reaction to this?
Well, first of all, Alan and I talked briefly at the Pittsburgh Symposium, and about October or so, I contacted him. Actually, it was probably September, and said, you know, I'm trying to work out a video for our chapter because we never had any video at all. And Alan said, well, I've been working on this project where we can do remote demonstrations. And I said, you know, what do you need? And he says, well, you need an internet connection, and you need a computer, and you need a monitor of some sort. And I said, well, we got that. And so he said, well, let's look to the future and try setting this up. And so in about November, I got an agreement from the Woodcraft store that we could hook into their internet without interrupting their point of sale system, because the security on those systems is tight. And so we strung you know, regular cable TV cable or the light through the building to the classroom. And long about January or so, we said, oh, well, now we'll try it. So we hooked up a test, and it worked. We used Skype on the computer, and Alan got on his Skype program, and good gracious, I didn't know all that was in the background. Hooked it up, and we talked to each other, and we switched to a different room where Lauren worked, and everything tested out well.
And your club, the guys sat for it.
Well, then we had a meeting, and it wasn't long after that test. And we hooked everything up, tested it, and then we started the meeting. And for an hour and a half, they sat totally silent. I've never seen woodturners go to a meeting without talking, and nobody talked. And they watched, and at the end of it, they all applauded. So it got what I wanted out of the message. The thing that was neat was Alan was in his shop doing all his thing. Lauren was in a different room doing very meticulous decorating on some jewelry, and Alan could flash in and let us see exactly what she was doing in almost microscopic precision. And then we could go back and look at his, what is that, a joiner? It's called a joiner, Chuck?
Oh yeah, that was
The offset chuck.
a chuck made by Richard Joyner.
Yeah.
To do the pendants that we do.
So it was well received, and it worked very, very well.
All right, so now what we're going to do is let's go over here, and Lyle is going to do his first remote demonstration next week. So after I posted a video of of some excerpts from the First State Club in Delaware, Lyle contacted me and said, this would be kind of cool. What do I need to get started? And I gave him some equipment lists and things like that. And recognizing, I tell people that Lyle is not technically sophisticated. Is that it? Yes, okay. Fortunately, Dory knows which end of the computer to blow into to get it to play music. But Lyle's doing his first session this week. And Lyle, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your experience with this and how you're sort of marketing it.
Yeah, I know he's got his high-tech camera here, but let me turn around so I can talk and you can hear me.
Well, I'll come over
He's
here.
a very, very understated statement here that I don't know anything about computers. I don't know anything about computers. I hardly know how to turn it on. If something goes wrong, I call my wife or the guy in the computer store. But you know, I'm starting at minus, not even zero. I'm starting and with Alan's help and patience, he's doctored me up into being able to do this, and it's not rocket science. Anybody could do this. If I can do it, it's proof that anybody can do this. And I've got a set of cameras. I've got my computer so I can switch the cameras. I can do everything just standing there and do a demo as if I was in the room. Just think about it. If you're an end user, a club, what's happening to your participants? They don't look at me on the lathe. They're looking up at the camera. They can't all stand behind me looking over my shoulder and see the cut. They're looking at the camera. Okay? They're listening to me through the audio of usually an amplifier of some kind. So why do I have to be in the room? I can make a better production from my shop with my tools and give you a better event than I could do if I were in your shop. And you don't have to clean up the shavings afterwards. But the bottom line is, this is not high tech. This is simple stuff. Take Skype and figure out a couple cameras, and it's all doable. If I can do it, anybody can do it. I guess that's the message.
Well, and I'll explain the hardware and the software in a couple of minutes. But the how this is done is not as important as that it is doable. You see, the mechanics of doing it, I can teach anybody. The idea that you can do it is the mindset change. to say, I don't have to be physically on location. I can do a better job, perhaps a better job, in my shop with my tools, with my respirator, with my dust collector, with, the way people can see the way I actually work. So let's talk about a couple of these things here. So the nice thing about this is that you can have a global audience. You're not limited to the people that live within driving distance of you. You're also able to get to people that are not currently well served. I know people that belong to clubs but never go to meetings. Why don't they go to meetings? I can't drive at night. And they just can't attend to meetings, they say. Or if you were doing a remote demonstration, you got all these people in your venue, but the Vice President Joe, he's in the hospital with a broken leg. Well, why can't he dial in and watch the demo, you see? So that's, you can do a lot of things here. Audience expectations have gotten much more sophisticated. People watch YouTube videos all the time. They watch television all the time. You cannot and should not get away with crappy audio and crappy video anymore. This era of apologizing for the photograph of your finished piece. You say, well, I don't know how to do photography. Well, you should learn to do photography. It's part of finishing your product. When I was a commercial photographer, the job or the photograph wasn't finished until it was in its final form and the bill and the check cleared. So as far as I'm concerned, whenever I do a wood turning piece, the piece isn't finished until the photograph is made and it is published. Because the odds of people seeing your work are really remote unless you actually show it to people. So it's the same thing. If you can make a good piece, you should learn how to do photography like you learn how to finish and buff and sand and do all that stuff. Photography and video is just part of the finishing process as far as I'm concerned. You'll notice that I'm somewhat opinionated on a lot of this stuff. But as people know me, that I am very highly opinionated, but I am not stubborn. You show me a better way to do something, I'm there. I don't care how long I've been doing it. Now, you've got different ways of distribution. You've got synchronous and asynchronous. A telephone call is synchronous. Voicemail is asynchronous. You leave the message, somebody listens to it later and maybe gets back to you. So if I were going to do a live demo, I could do a live demo via Skype or Zoom or any number of transports that allow you to have two-way conversations, two-way video conversations, real time. Another approach would be to do it asynchronously, like recording a YouTube video. So you could record something that people will look at their leisure, on demand. Granted, it's not interactive, but let's face it, YouTube is there for a very good reason. There's some other interesting things that I'm rather sensitive to. I tell people that I'm a motorcycle rider, and there are motorcycle riders that ride with t-shirt and flip-flops. I'm not that guy. I'm in full armored regalia. I wear a conspicuity vest. I've got additional lighting. I've got a headlight modulator, a taillight modulator. In my shop, Lauren and I simply do not turn on the lathe until our respirator helmet is on, our dust collector is on, and our hearing protector is on. High-tech noise-canceling earphones, by the way. And so when I demonstrate, I want to make sure that people can hear me while the respirator helmet is on, while the dust collector is on. And I'm tired of going to demonstrations where someone says, well, I'm not wearing my face shield because no one can hear me. That's nonsense. You're not wearing the face shield because you don't like wearing a face shield. You don't use it in your shop. And I've got very strong feelings about demonstrators who do not wear personal protection because it sets a very bad example for the audience. It also, very interesting, mitigates insurance issues for clubs. Clubs very often need to have an AAW member be a demonstrator because only AAW members are covered by the insurance. Well, if I'm demonstrating from my home, you could get anybody to demonstrate. They don't have to be an AAW member or whatever organization is sort of hosting. So that's kind of a nice thing. You're not worried about people. You're not worried about hurting other people. You're not worried about something flying off your lathe and hitting somebody in the audience. It's rather nice. But the real key to all of this is that it's affordable and accessible. Clubs, who are by definition poor by choice, can't necessarily afford to bring in outside talent. Aside from the fees, you've got transportation, you've got lodging, you've got food, you've got all this kind of stuff. And when Lauren and I demonstrate, and we've demonstrated to maybe all the clubs within about a 4-hour drive of our home, it takes me forever to pack up all my tools, load them into the car, drive wherever we're going to drive, set everything up, do the demonstration for an hour or an hour and a half, break everything down, load it back in the car, go drive back home, stare at it in my living room for a few days until I get it back down into the shop. In a remote demonstration, when the demonstration is finished, you turn off the lights. You're done. That's nice. There's no cleanup. You sweep up your own shop, but you don't have to do that now. You're just done. I've got all this stuff. This took me a tremendous amount of time to pack it all up and make everything so that I could demonstrate all this stuff for you. It would have been much easier if I just did this from home. I wouldn't have had to do all of this. I wouldn't have had $85 in baggage fees just to bring all this gear here, right? Each way. So that's kind of a cool thing worth noting. So if I get it off the bed here. All right, so eliminate travel. So what can you gain out of this? Oh, by the way, there are logistical things with dealing with internet connections and wired cameras and stuff like that, but they are no more difficult than dealing with missed airplane flights. My car is snowed in and I can't get to the venue. The odds of somebody arriving at your venue on time and being able to do their demo and watch the 6 club members crawling underneath the one-way lathe trying to get the inverter started again. If something goes wrong in my shop, if this lathe stopped working, I just go over to that lathe. You see, you do whatever you can do. But it's more than just the camera work. You can do multi-camera video, you can do high-definition audio, and you can do various types of multimedia, like photographs, PowerPoint presentations, pre-recorded videos. There is no reason in the world for someone to work at a whiteboard anymore and draw that same drawing again. Why spend the time drawing it where you can just say, here's the drawing? And in fact, some of the things we've been playing with have whiteboards where you could share the whiteboard and you can circle stuff in real time, kind of like what they do in some sports games. So you can also record the session, which brings up some interesting issues that we'll start discussing, maybe not tonight, but we'll start discussing about, well, who has the right to copy your video? What is your agreement with the club? In our clubs, when somebody demonstrates, there's somebody there with a camera, and the understanding is that we'll make that video available to the club members who just couldn't make the meeting. But we're not publishing it on YouTube. We're not publishing the person's demonstration, because after all, very often that's the way they're earning their living. I mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was before the session started, one of the paradigm shifts is that the demonstrator operates the cameras. And this is kind of an important thing because we don't always have good camera operators. The camera operators, you don't get a chance to rehearse with them to show, this is what I'm going to show next. I want you to be over here so I can show you the bevel here. But I only want to show you the bevel for like 15 seconds, and then I want to get back to turning. So if I can do something real quick, I can get that done faster than waiting for the camera person to get into position. This also becomes, camera switching becomes very interesting in our use case, because we're worst case. We're 2 demonstrators. Even in a room like this, Lauren will be over there demonstrating at a table. I'm over here at the lathe. We're tag teaming back and forth So you don't, where's the camera person going to be? I want to show what she's working on right now for 15 seconds while or maybe as an inset in what I'm doing, or while I'm setting up the next piece, I want to just switch over to her camera. And I don't want the camera person running back and forth. We can actually do a better presentation if it's multi-camera and I'm storyboarding it. One other thing that's really useful is that people are seeing your shop, your procedures, what's hanging on the walls in your shop, the way you've got your lathe set up and all of that. There's a lot to be said for that. And there we go. So remote demonstrations can and probably should be interactive. So on the club side, they've got a computer with a camera and hopefully a remote microphone so that people can ask questions. So the demonstrator can see the audience, although I got to tell you, watching a couple of dozen guys with gray beards sitting watching a monitor isn't the most thrilling video. But if somebody does, okay, not everybody has beards. But my guess is everybody in this room is gray whether or not they admit it. So it is interactive. But what you can also do is the demonstrator can send items in advance to pass around the group, pass around the room. Much like a cooking show. You don't put everything in the pot and say, okay, now let's stand there and wait. You pull out one from under the counter and say, this is what it looks like after it's been cooked for 20 minutes. So this is a pet of mine. I'm going to make the contention that the audio is more important than the video. What you are saying, in most cases, is more important than what you are showing. You can actually be very descriptive. There are people that listen to baseball games on the radio. You can know what's going on without actually seeing it. And in a session that when we teach, my guess is that of an hour and a half session, the lathe is actually turning for about 20 minutes. The other hour and 10 minutes is us talking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, showing you pictures. And the narration and the color, why is the demonstrator doing something? That to me is most important. Yeah, you get something about, oh, look at the way he positions or she positions the bevel and all of that. But right now you're more interested in the history of the work, how this person came to do the type of work that they're doing. And also you'll find out, and when YouTube first came out, the videos were 320 by 240, really crappy videos. But if the audio is good, people will watch crappy videos. But if the video is good and the audio is crappy, people turn it off. Lauren was watching a video of a wonderful turner the other day, and she practically turned off the video because the audio was so bad. And there's no excuse for that. So the voice needs to be heard over the noise. Okay, so in the demonstration I'm going to do here, I'm going to be using a couple of different kinds of cameras. Mostly we're depending on webcams. Webcams are great because they're inexpensive, they're high definition, they focus closely, they're very lightweight, so it makes them easy to mount, and they connect to the computer via USB. So these are two very good cameras. This one here is $99, this one's $69. So we're not talking about $500 or $1,000 camcorders here. You can also use camcorders. Camcorders have the advantage that they've got optical zooms. And so an example of this is this camera here. And what I can do with this is I should be able to zoom in and out. Hello? My little remote is not remoting. Okay, there it goes. It's supposed to be able to do it from the front, but okay, so I'll do it from the back. So this has an optical zoom. The disadvantage of this is that the cameras are expensive, and they don't connect via USB. So I'm connecting into a little adapter called a Magewell dongle, a Magewell HDMI adapter. So I'm taking the HDMI feed from that and going into something that adapts and puts out a USB 3 signal. So I can plug it in as if it's another webcam. Now, one of the things you'll note when I'm switching between cameras here is we don't have a 6-second delay between cameras and things like that. So this is all the switching is being handled by the computer, and I'll show you how that's being done. The switching system that I'm using, there's hardware switchers and there's software switchers. Software switchers can be inexpensive. The program I'm using on this computer, although it's not the license that I've got, the basic license for this is $60. We're not talking about a $30,000 TriCaster here. And it gives you instant HD switching. It gives you picture-in-picture. It lets you record. It gives you transitions. It does all that stuff. It controls cameras, videos, images, slides, or whatever. And if you really want to put in the money for it, like $700, you can have instant replay. So you could be doing something and say, show it again? Okay. And it'll show it again. It's mostly used for sports, but I could see where that might be kind of cool thing to have here. Hardware switchers are inexpensive, but as Jamie and rather as Rick and other people will tell you, AEW abandoned them because a couple of years ago they had 8 seconds of blue screen every time they switched cameras. And that's because of the handshaking that has to be done between the camera and the receiver. Well, they have caching switchers, but they're $1,500 a piece. It makes computers pretty good question. A question. I'll go through the programs in a minute. Or you could go with inexpensive standard definition switching, and that's what's being used in most of the rooms. And I understand why it's being used in most cases, but I'm hesitant to go kicking and screaming back into the 1970s. So where possible, use a wired connection. You can do wireless, but wired will give you a better signal generally, not always. I mean, I've got my wireless connection here is as fast as my wired connection. And I don't want to go into the details on this slide, but it's most reliable, dedicated bandwidth with one less variable to have to deal with. And it shows a couple of different wireless types here. And I just do one more slide here before getting into showing you the demo itself. Although this is actually part of the demo, you can either do point-to-point, where like a Skype call, like a telephone call, where you and another person or you and another computer are conversing. You can also do that as a group, kind of like having someone pick up the extension on your phone call. But it's one phone call. It can be fully interactive, and you use programs like Skype or Zoom to be the communications transport. So the communications transport is quite separate from the program that's controlling the cameras. Because as far as the communications program is concerned, you're just handing it a camera. It just says, well, what webcam do you want me to use? Well, I'm using the output from this program as if it was a camera. So I would tell Skype, use, in this case, the program is vMix. I would say use the vMix output as your camera input. Or you could do streaming, where you're doing like Facebook Live or YouTube Live, where it's a live event. You're streaming, dozens or hundreds or thousands of people could be watching at one time. It's not interactive, but it's real-time broadcast of what's going on in your shop. Typically, questions are done via chat, text via chat. So YouTube and Facebook recently came up with live also. Or, as I mentioned before, you could do recorded asynchronous video for on demand. So Services and transport. Services and transports are the communications tool. Most of them are free. Skype is free. Zoom, which is my now current favorite, is free. It has some very interesting abilities, including the ability to record. And streaming is YouTube Live and Facebook and recorded YouTube, Vimeo, and things like that. And a club really needs only a few things to receive a conversation. The same thing that grandma would need to receive a Skype call. You need a computer or even a tablet or a phone that can connect to a monitor. Preferably, you want a wired connection. You want a speaker in the room so that the audience can hear what's going on. I think at the first state, the speakers in the TV that they were using was enough to cover the couple of dozen people in the room. Ideally, you want a webcam so that the demonstrator can see the audience. And you want a microphone. And of course, you need an internet connection. The microphone so that the demonstrator can hear the audience. A basic setup is 3 cameras. And the reason we do 3 cameras is we want one above the lathe, like this. See, above the lathe. In fact, I'm going to get rid of me. We got one above the lathe. And this is mounted on an articulated arm, so I can move it very easily to wherever I want it to be. These are 2 webcams, that's correct. And I can, there's nothing interesting on the lathe at the moment, but you get the general idea. Yes, in fact, that's one of the things I specify. On this camera, you typically want to lock focus because every time you put your hand in there, you don't want it jumping up and down. So you're absolutely right. So this one I recommend to be fixed focus. And, it's generally pointed at the headstock or whatever. And I'm using this magic arm here, and I'll show you the 2 different types of magic arms that I use. And then the second camera is a movable camera. I want to make it easy to move. And so this one is on a microphone stand. And it's very nice when you're working with a little webcam like this because there's no weight. You're not trying to balance a pound camera. I've got them on quick releases. You can see the quick release on this one here. You can see how this just snaps off and then just clips back on. So I can take this one off and walk around my shop with it. Or in the case of the first date group, I had it on the lathe, and then I wanted to go into the other room at an assembly table and show some tools. So I just had a little quick release on a little stand mounted on my workbench, and I was just able to move the camera in there very quickly. The nice thing about this is that this is I might as well show this. This is a microphone stand with a gooseneck going into a boom arm. And the reason I use a microphone stand is because they've got a weighted base. All right, so the idea here is if you want to show something, so here's a little tip, is if you want to show something, this camera is going to try to focus over here. If you come over here, it may not zoom in. So what you want to do is you want to put your hand behind it. You want to block the background. Because if I come over here, it's going to try to refocus on this, because that's the primary. So if you want to show the bevel on your chisel, you put your hand up and then let it focus. So that's kind of nice. So this is a lovely little camera. They do very well in low light levels, and that's another thing that's pretty important here. What you want is flat lighting. You want the most light possible, but you don't want a spotlight because that becomes beyond the dynamic range of the camera. And you get into trouble because your eye adapts to it quickly, but if you really want to make it nice and flat lighting. Of course, I'm really geeky. I put this green screen behind me. You see this green screen here, and I'm using that to drop out the background. So this allows you to do a technique called chroma key, which is lovely. You know, that weather girl who's showing you the weather, or the guys doing the traffic, they're not standing in front of a TV monitor. They're standing in front of a blue screen or a green screen, and they're just dropping in whatever is necessary. In my shop, I just took a piece of green fabric that I got from Joann's and hung it on a rod and put on a couple of hooks so I can roll it up. But the geek in me said, oh, it'd be kind of cool to have a pop-up screen to just drop behind me here. You don't need to, you know, buy a real green screen. But again, you want the green screen to be lit flat. Ideally, you want separate lighting on the background and light overhead from behind you. It helps separate out. You're seeing on my picture here, I'm getting a little bit of green halo. Well, that's because I'm not really lighting this background properly, and we get some really funky lights in this room with a really weird color spectrum. All right, so I'm also using,
Alan,
yes?
can I just say that, you know, when you attach cameras to the lathe, you're not attaching the cameras to the lathe, you actually have them.
Yeah, that's a good point. In my shop, what Lauren said is that when possible, don't do what I'm doing here, because I'm attaching this to something that's sitting on the headstock. Put it on a separate stand, or have it come down from your ceiling or whatever, so that if your lathe is vibrating, your camera isn't jerking all over the place. Try to isolate the camera from the lathe wherever possible. But in this case, I wanted to demonstrate a couple of things. One is that however you do it, you want to make it, however you do it, you want to make it so that it's easy for you to maneuver the camera. And what I'm doing here, let me just pull this over here, and let me get rid of my picture-in-picture. So this is this is what's called a magic arm. There's a couple of different styles of magic arms. This one's fairly expensive. This one's about $150 or so. But you can get a version of it like this, which is 11 inches long. I think they're about $14. And you can do a lot with these. I mean, and you can put them together, you know, couple them and things like that. So I'm going to pass these around. So there's a couple of things. Maybe, but for $14, it's easy enough to find out. And on here, we've got this, this quick release here that there's got a little lock on the bottom, but you can just pop that out and pop it back in, and you snap it down. So I'll pass these around to the audience just so that you can see what they're like. I get the Magic Arms on Amazon, and I get these quick releases either on Amazon or on eBay. They're normally, the brand name ones are like $35 or $40 a piece, and these are about $9 a piece. So I've shown two different webcams. I've shown the I can't even talk, the camcorder approach, and the camera in the lid of the computer. This camera here is in the lid of the computer, and I've got it chroma keyed out, so let me do that one there and over here. And what I'm doing is I'm showing picture-in-picture. And I've decided to make this overlay small and in the lower right-hand corner. But what I can do is I can take that anytime I want, that picture-in-picture image, and zoom it full screen. So that's kind of cool. So those are the basic cameras. I'm running a wireless network here. And it's all these three computers are attached via wire. All right, so they're attached through Ethernet cable. And the reason I did a wireless is I wanted to be able to use my cell phone as a camera. This is a game changer. This really is. If I turn this on here and I select this here, we will go to this one here. All right. So what I've got here is my iPhone connected wirelessly to my network. Okay, this is kind of cool. And it will broadcast audio, it'll broadcast video, low latency, real time. But what's nice about it, aside from the fact that you can move around your shop and you can, show your setup here. So here we're showing Lauren's computer, and we're showing the little tablet computer and the webcams that are attached here. Think about what this is. This is a camera, battery powered. It's in your pocket, that is close focus, high definition, with a light. So you see this little hollow form I made a couple of years ago? Would you like to see inside the hollow form? Now, I've got to tell you, to me, this is very cool. To be able to go in what you would normally use a borescope to use, or an inspection camera, to be able to do something like this in real time, to me, is very, very cool.
They've actually got borescopes that you could buy on Amazon now for about $17 that you can attach to the cameras.
They're absolutely right. All the borescopes, though, that I've seen, the decent borescopes are all standard definition. They're not high definition. You've got a couple of webcams with little lights in them, but they're not particularly good. I've got a couple of borescopes, but the borescopes are really designed to go into cylinders and things like that. So this is pretty cool. Yeah?
Hello, we can
Take
do
a
dueling
photo-
iPhones here. Yes.
Take a photograph or show the tiny little object, and then I'm
Right.
taking a picture of you and the screen all at the same
Okay.
time. Thank you.
All right. So this is pretty cool. So let me show you what I've got set up here. As long as I'm in mobile mode, what I did here is I've got a computer. The computer is running this program called vMix. It's one of several camera switching programs, camera control programs. Okay? vMix, V-M-I-X. You'll see that on the slide in a few seconds. So this is vMix. And I've got some wires coming out here. These are just my USB 3 connections going into a hub that's underneath here, because I want to be able to plug in a lot of devices. Okay, tip number 1. You can't plug in more than one high-def camera into a USB channel. Your computer might have several USB ports, but you may not have that many USB channels. It's kind of like looking at the outlets in your house. Just the number of sockets you've got doesn't tell you how many lines you've got. And you can't put 2 toasters on one 15-amp circuit, even though I've got the plug there. It's just not going to work. Because I find it really difficult to type up here, and the reason that the computer is mounted up here is I want to be able to use the webcam that's in the computer's lid. Because most computers will have 2, maybe 3 USB channels, and the webcam's on its own USB channel. So that's an extra camera. So if your computer only has 2 USB channels, you can put in 2 webcams and use that camera. In my case, I can use 3 USB cameras and that camera. I'm also, I like working with a remote keyboard. This is a little wireless keyboard, which allows me not to go up here. And what I've done is I've set, in this particular program, keyboard macros, keyboard shortcuts. So when I press the 1 key, the first camera, the input number 1 goes to the screen. The 2 key sends camera 2 to the screen. So if I go here, I can show you this. So this is camera 1, camera 2, and let me just go back here. And also, because I don't particularly like the mouse pad on that computer, I've got an extra little mouse pad here. So this is all just for my convenience. And then you can say, well, what in the world is this thing here? Well, this thing is a MIDI controller. And that's another nice thing about vMix. It allows a MIDI controller. And what this allows me to do is by moving these up and down, I've programmed it so that This does a magnification. So if I go to number 1, I can not zoom in, but I can magnify. Same thing here. So it's like a digital image. It's a digital magnifier. It's not a zoom, not an optical zoom. I prefer to move the camera in, but sometimes if you're just trying to show something over here and you say, oh, all right, let me just show you a little detail, it's very nice to do that. And I've also set up here, and I've done on the keyboard, if I go back to number 8 here, what I've done is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 gives me the inputs across. The next row below it takes those same inputs but puts it into the picture-in-picture, puts it into the overlay. So if I press Q on, which is underneath the number 1, camera 1 will go into the overlay. If I press it again, it goes out. I've got one that's set up where I can zoom what's ever in the inset up or not. Again, it's not important that you know the mechanics of how this is done. It's important that you know that picture-in-picture is possible. It's important that you know that you don't have to keep running back to your computer to do this. On my system, this is all set up on the headstock of my lathe, just because of the angles of the lathe. We can do.
Can we ask a question?
Sure.
The thing you were calling a MIDI controller, is it meant for music, but you're using it for video?
Yes, it's meant for music, meant for musicians, right? And it's $50. And then you spend several weeks trying to figure out how to set the parameters on it, but I'm happy to just give those settings away to anybody. Now, we can also do things like animated titles. In fact, I'll do that again. You can see an animated title. So you would have your title and your description in there. That's part of the program. We can play video clips, pre-made video clips. And I showed this a little while earlier while things were loading. But this idea of having something that you've done before and with audio, and I'm not outputting the audio at the moment, but these are 3D printers. These are wood-based filament that I'm printing with. This is a little video that was some clips from the First State demo. So you can see Lauren, this was the first time there was a problem with her computer. It was a little fuzzy, but this looks familiar. You're familiar with the techniques here. And then, of course, I put the text and stuff under it in post-production. And so here I was showing a slideshow. I was showing picture after picture after picture. Then we went down into the shop, and I was showing the tools I was using. And I'll just jump ahead a little bit. Here's when I was just about to put on the respirator. I was explaining how mine is tethered to a HEPA filter rather than to my pack, and I always have this on. No, this is actually has a hose that's going to a wall-mounted HEPA filter. I've got a room filter.
Did you monkey wrench it, or is it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's a HEPA filter meant for vacuum cleaning or something else?
Well, it's meant for room filtration.
Gotcha.
And I've got that idea from Eugene Schlack, who had posted it on.
The purpose of the question is, do you hear a bunch of noise coming through the hose? Or
No, it's real quiet. Because first of all, it's quiet to begin with, but you also don't have a fan on your head.
Yeah.
It's very, very quiet. But I've also got Airstreams and Breathe Easies and things like that. And so if there's something that I want to show that it just doesn't make sense let me just go back to the beginning on this, where it doesn't make sense to break down the setup to just set up for this one procedure. Like this is where I insert threaded inserts into end grain on shaving brushes that we make. And so rather than break down the setup during a demo, I'd rather just show you this because I can, I don't have to take the time to do the setup. It just shows the way I'm doing this. And as I mentioned to somebody earlier, the little slots that are in your threaded inserts are not for you to insert a screwdriver in. They actually go into the wood, and that helps cut the threads. And so here I'm using a drawbar and holding a 3/8 inch threaded rod that's going to actually drive everything in here. And so I'm going to crank it in as I'm moving the tailstock forward. So it's kind of a cool thing. But the point is that you can spend 3 minutes doing a demonstration that would take you 20 minutes to set up. And this is every bit as good as if you were doing it live, because you're narrating it. You're telling them what we're doing. And so let's see. So what we've got on my screen here, this is a desktop capture of what I'm looking at. I'm using a program called vMix. And if we look in the right-hand corner, the reason why in the upper right-hand corner it's the same image going into itself, into infinity, it's the looking at it's sitting in the barber chair watching the two mirrors. They're each seeing each other, so that's why the thing in the upper right corner is what's being output. The thing in the left is called the preview. On the bottom, we've got the inputs. Now, the $60 version of vMix allows for 4 inputs, 3 of which can be cameras. So if you've got a laptop computer and 2 webcams, those are your 3 cameras. And then you can use the 4th input to do something like a slide deck or whatever. And you can keep closing that 4th input and loading another slide deck or whatever. You can do that. I went for the $350 license, which has an unlimited, like 100 or 200 different inputs. So I just wanted to have everything here. Just makes it more convenient for me rather than have to switch things in and out. But $60 gets you started. Yeah.
Since you've gone back to that portion, you made a comment about this setup allows for 1 high-definition camera because of the limit of the computer channels.
No, these are all high-definition cameras. Every camera I'm using here is high-def.
It was only 1 real camera that you could use because of you were talking about
No.
versus USB.
No, this is USB. It doesn't care if it's a webcam or this dongle.
If you convert to USB, you can have as many.
That's right. Yeah, or another computer on the network for your NDI. NDI has only been out a couple of weeks, but it has changed everything. Imagine a corporation with cameras in another building or on your same network. So let's move through this. So in this particular case, if you go get vMix, and vMix is one of several programs, and vMix only runs on a PC. It doesn't run on a Mac. And one of the reasons why I like vMix so much is that if you look down here at the very bottom of the screen, you can't see that. It's just nicked off the screen. I'm running at 33% CPU utilization. And that's while I'm recording. What it's doing is it's not using the CPU for its rendering. It's using what's called the GPU, the graphics processor, to do its rendering. Very cool. So another program may be using 90% of the CPU. This is only using a very little bit of it. And most of that is in the recording that I'm doing. You'll see at the bottom here that there's a record button that's on. If I click on this external button, that will take what is ever in the output window, the right-hand window, and send it out as if it was a webcam. So that's when you connect up to Skype. You say, Skype, use the vMix output as your camera. Or use the ManyCam output as your camera, or use the SparkoCam output as your camera. Whatever switching program you're using, you tell the Skype or Zoom, use that camera. Now, something like Zoom makes it very easy to let you switch camera sources. So you could, have just a couple of different webcams on your system and not use a camera switching program. So, but I like the features, the transitions, and all of that. So what I'm going to do is let's get back to the slide deck.
Overload your system instead of streaming it out. You recorded it somehow.
Well, I am recording at the moment. I'm recording while I'm streaming. Yes. And there are MP4 takes more resources, say, than MPEG-2 and things like that. And these are all things that I, hopefully with other people in this room, will start documenting the how to do this, the tools that you need, the materials that you need, and such. But let's sort of do a quick review on this. If I stop this here and come up here. All right, so what's the basic setup? The basic setup is a computer, a couple of cameras, and a microphone. We've got the computer. We've got the webcam in the computer. Right? You've seen all of this already. We've got a couple of webcams. So one computer, two webcams, and you want to make it easy to move the cameras. That's key. You know, it's like kind of like variable speed lathes. If it's too much trouble to change the speed, you just use whatever the hell speed you're on. Well, you really should use the right speed. You really should point the camera at the right place. But if it's a big effort to change the camera, you won't do it. So you want to make it easy. If I wanted one over here and another one over here, no problem. Put another stand over there with a quick release, and very simply, 2 seconds later, I could have moved the camera to the other side of the lathe, if that's something that I'm apt to do. Microphone. I normally use a wireless microphone that's highly noise canceling, because I'm a worst case scenario. I've got a respirator helmet on with a fan blowing over my face, and I've got the dust collector on. So I've spent a lot of time working out audio systems. Advanced hardware setup. Use an external monitor. At the top of the screen, you probably didn't notice, there's a little full screen button that says, oh, okay, take whatever my output is, send it out to another monitor. So that would be the way I could send it out to a projector, or I could. I'm sending it, no, this is just a light. I didn't know what I was going to get into. But I'm sending this out. If I take it off full screen, it's not trying to send a video anyplace. I'm not using external. I'm not telling it to go anywhere. I'm simply saying, go send your output to another monitor. And on my screen, I'm extending the display. So I'm looking at one monitor. It's like having a wide screen. And we'll just send this one to the other monitor. I'm using a wireless keypad. I like a little trackpad mouse. I've got a MIDI controller, as you saw. And what is kind of cool about it is that I can use it to reposition things up and down, left and right, which is kind of handy when you got an inset or something like that. You just want to move that headstock over a little bit, one way or the other, just to make the picture-in-picture easier. And once again, I can zoom and do that stuff. And so I like that. And I'm using USB extension cords. And these USB extension cords, I think, are good to about 25 feet. So USB extension cords are very good, because I'll run one into the other room in my shop. And so I can just move the camera from place to place or whatever. It's drawing power. Doesn't make a separate power, but it will let you know that something is connected on the other end. These are actually pretty good. Okay, the geeky hardware stuff. So what I've got is a green screen behind me. Whoops, a green screen behind me. I'm using a camcorder instead of webcams. Again, it's expensive. I was using the phone via this app called NDI Cam. You could use a standard res CCTV camera or a borescope via a USB adapter like an EasyCap adapter. I've got the wireless MIDI controller. That's kind of like this wired MIDI controller, except it's a DJ thing, which you can just spin a wheel in your hand, and it's kind of cool. I got tired of packing stuff. Or you could use a desktop computer instead of a notebook computer. The advantage of a desktop computer is that you can just keep adding USB channels. And so you could have 4 cameras or 8 cameras or whatever, and you can have dedicated USB channels by putting in cards. Lighting, I mentioned before, you want it to be broad, preferably bright lighting, but even. Fluorescent or LEDs, I bought a strip from Home Depot behind me, above me, to help light the green screen and just generally give more light towards the front of my lathe. And that was a 4-foot LED strip. I don't know that I'm ever going to buy another fluorescent tube. I mentioned that you want to avoid high intensity spotlighting, and where possible, light the green screen separately. Oh, this is what should have been in the other slide deck. Should have been up earlier. So we've shown full screen camera switching. We've shown close focus. We've shown how easy it is to move the cameras. We've shown picture-in-picture. We've played a pre-recorded video. I've used the iPhone as a camera. I'm showing this PowerPoint deck. I've done a desktop share. I'm showing the wireless keyboard, the MIDI controller, and I can even come over here, just give you an idea, and go to which camera? Let's do this one here. This one is this little computer, this little tablet computer. It's a little jaggy because, let's face it, it's not very powerful. But in a pinch, you can do it. And so what I'd like to do is open it up for questions.
Hi. Our club is ready to receive live video demonstrations. Who knows what demonstrators are ready to?
That's a good question. And one of the things in one of the slides coming up is next steps, is that we have a chicken and egg phenomenon going here. Clubs aren't set up to receive, and demonstrators aren't set up to demonstrate. And so what we're trying to do, we're trying to start an initiative with the AAW that will come up with a list, like you can have a list of demonstrators. Now the question is, well, not only what do they do, but can they do this remotely? The more demonstrators offer this, the more attractive it is for clubs to say, oh, cool, we'll set up for that. And the more clubs that set up for that, the more attractive it is to the demonstrators to say, oh yeah, you know, there's a venue for me. So we have this chicken and egg. It's starting to happen. I've done some. I know Trent Bosch has done some. Lyle is starting to do some. The idea here is to start thinking about this differently. Thinking about this, what would you like to accomplish? What is your target audience? Doing something like this, for example, let's talk about people that are not well served. You could very easily have somebody doing American Sign Language in the picture-in-picture during your presentation, because if you're doing a presentation and you've got somebody signing, but other people are looking at the monitor, well, that doesn't do you any good because now they can't see the signing. So trying to get things, or maybe doing something with a high contrast filter on this to help people that are visually impaired. I mean, I'm really looking at this from a where do we want to go with this? Not necessarily doing just the obvious. Yeah, your question.
Other than the cost of equipment, what is the projected cost of these demonstrations? I mean, from the demonstrator's viewpoint. My point is this going to be cheaper than having a demonstrator fly in, bring his equipment, put him up in a hotel, and buying meals?
Wildly cheaper, wildly less expensive. The question is how does or does the demonstrator adjust their fee? Because right now, demonstrators are not making any money. I mean, when you think about the time that they're spent away from the shop, the time that they have to pack and travel and unpack, and the disruption to their business, you're paying, it's an hour demonstration. It's not an hour demonstration for the demonstrator. It's a day's worth of preparation and breakdown. So the question is, can or should it be a less expensive fee? My answer is probably not, because the demonstrator was giving away that time anyway. You should be nice to the demonstrator and let them reclaim their time. But the obvious things are you don't have travel fees, you don't have snow delays, you don't have snowed-in flights, you don't have missed pickups at the airport. And there are, what happens if your computer crashes? My computer crashed about an hour before this session started, so I just reloaded it again. But worst case, I could have done the whole presentation with my iPhone, and I could have switched it around and done that, right? What happens if? What happens when? So I'm sort of, I say belt and suspenders. I want a backup plan. It's one of the reasons I've got 3 computers here. Rather, just if one were to die, how would we recover from it? If my Skype connection or my internet connection on my end or the other end were to die, how would we recover? Well, there's a telephone. And you want to see if there's a way that you could broadcast your telephone call to the group. My approach is, at any session, I know what I'd like to do, but it comes down to how do we best spend our time together? And if I can't show you something, fine, we'll talk. And if we can't talk, if the audio goes out, fine, I'll write stuff on a pad and show it to the camera. You don't give up so easily. I'm not that flappable. Was there a question in the back?
Alan, the green board is for projecting, like I understand that weather people do this. You project a video on that board and you can actually talk.
Yeah, what the green screen is used for is a technique called chroma keying, which simply says whatever is green, make invisible. Make it transparent. So then if I put another image behind it, whether it be a picture or a video, whatever, now I'm floating in front of that. So that's what chroma key is. And so if I were to wear something green, you'd see right through me. And the reason we use green and blue is that, the reason we use green and blue is that the very few flesh tones have green and blue in them. More questions?
What are possibilities in a location where you don't have a wired internet connection? Can you do over cell phone?
You can do over cell phone. What these services will do is they will throttle back the bandwidth and the resolution to match. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting when someone says, well, we don't have wireless, in most cases you might not have a good wireless connection in the room, but you can very often get a wired connection. Meaning, like one of our chapters meets in a church rec room. The wireless in there is terrible. But you can run a LAN cable 300 feet, maybe to the priest's office, and just plug into their router and get a wired connection. Or you can go and buy a wireless 802.11 AC, which is as fast as a wired connection. That's what I've got down here. That's a gigabit wireless connection. You go and plug it into their thing, and you provide the wireless access point. So there's lots of ways of doing this. Again, I think that the logistics of doing that are no more daunting than trying to get people to your site. And I'm happy to help people with this. Now, one of the first questions that Phil McDonald, the director of the AAW, asked me is, what's in it for you? Are you trying to, sell a system? No, I've got a real job. It allows me to be a wood turner. And, but I am happy to help mentor people. I've spent a lot of time with Lyle, again, because he's starting from ground zero, knowing nothing about this. Nothing about how to use a computer and all of that. So I'm happy to work with some of you. I'll be happy to do like one-on-one demonstrations for you. I am anxious for more people to become demonstrators and for more clubs to be able to receive demonstrators, because I think it's good for everybody. And that's the reason why this was put in as a late edition as a special interest night session, because I didn't think this could or should wait another year to see what happens at the next symposium. Yeah. I'll come visit you.
Okay. So you get interaction back from the club. How
Yeah.
are you receiving that, questions from them? Is
Oh,
that you
I'm-
getting an earpiece, or is it coming off your monitor, or are you getting a speaker?
In my case, I'm using a headset that has an earpiece in it, much like what you've got there, except I'm using a DECT system, not a Bluetooth system. And so I'm hearing them, I'm seeing them because I'm looking at my Skype or my Zoom image, which is quite nice. Other questions? He's cutting off my head. He says we're running out of time here. So let me just do something here, and if I go to, let's do a wipe over to there, and we go to the end. Where do we go from here? Continue these discussions at your club. Continue these discussions on online forums. There are questions to be raised. Let us know your concerns, your success stories, your tribulations, and all of that. And think about the intellectual property issues. Okay, so the software, there was a question before about the software. I'm using vMix. There's another one called ManyCam, which is more of a consumer program than a professional program. So you could have little googly glasses and Viking horns on your head and arrows through your head and all of that. Wirecast and VidBlaster are competitors of vMix, but they're in the $350 to $500 range. vMix you can download and use the full version, 4K video and everything, the version that would cost you $1,000 or more. You can download that and use all their features for 60 days. Then, if you decide that you want to use it, you buy whatever license level you want. There's standard definition, there's high definition, basic standard definition, basic high definition, which, as I mentioned, allow 4 inputs, 3 of which can be cameras. Or you can go for the one that I've got, which is the standard HD version, which gets lots of different inputs. There are other things like Sparkosoft. Sparkosoft is interesting. It's a fairly inexpensive program, but it has a unique feature of being able to take an output from one of my Nikon DSLR cameras and use that. That's very weird, very cool. Open OBS and XSplit are usually used by gamers. You'll see that gamers are doing this interactive stuff with other people playing online games all the time when they're recording this stuff. So this is where we're going with this stuff. And there are some of us that are doing it now. And so one of your questions is, well, you know, who's available to do demonstrations? Well, if you're interested in a jewelry demonstration or a shaving brush demonstration, Lauren and I are available to do this. And Lyle is ramping up, and I'm hoping that this time next year, a bunch of people in this room will be able to say, I did a demonstration, and here's what I liked about it, here's what we didn't like about it, or we had people come to our club remotely. How many people here are responsible for programs for their clubs? All right. So that's, you know, to be able to go back to your club and say, hey, we should consider this. That's a really important part of all of this. So I'll be around. It takes me obviously a little while to break down my setup here. I thank you all for coming and listening to me ramble on for an hour or so. Let me just put up the my contact information, which I think was on the next slide, unless that was on. Is it there? Okay, yeah. You can reach me at info@zenreich.com. I only have like 24 email addresses. That's the easiest one. It's ZENREICH. We will make the slide deck available, but I don't know where yet. Probably on the AAW website. They were considering broadcasting this to the hotel or the convention. But this is my pleasure to do this, and this is another way of sharing what you know and learning from other people. Thank you very much.